This is a purely scientific webinar, and it's an initiative of our board member, Krzysztof Grzewozniak from Poland, in collaboration with Krystyna Kyriakos. And I will let Krzysztof to say a few words at the beginning about the webinar, and of course then Krystyna. Please, Krzysztof.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy that we have so many and so important participants in this webinar. We are thrilled to welcome you all to this webinar today. The webinar is on the effects and challenges in the implementation of tobacco flavor ban, first of all in the European Union, but also in Canada, to mark 1 year after the enforcement of EU ban on menthol, which is the first sign or step in evaluation of the impact of the ban on smoking behaviors, health beliefs, and other measures of tobacco control. In May 2020, the European Tobacco Product Directive, which bans characterizing flavors in cigarettes and Rios tobacco, extended in application to menthol, where tobacco industry interference delayed the timeline for menthol for a few years, unfortunately. This was a tremendous feat, success, and the European member states have taken the global lead alongside other countries such as Canada and the UK in addressing flavored tobacco products. As more countries continue or want to at least adopt tobacco flavor bans, it is critical to understand how these policies are implemented, what the population level impact is, what are current and future challenges in the enforcement, what steps might be undertaken to expand the ban for other tobacco and novel products. This is a big challenge, in fact, and how the tobacco industry can respond and how to counteract its strategy. This is more or less the aim of the webinar. Now I'm giving the floor to Krystyna and kindly asking her to explain the concept of the webinar and presentation and topics.
Thank you, Krzysztof, and welcome everyone. In today's webinar, each of these aspects that Krzysztof just went over is going to attempt to be addressed with some of this initial evidence that is coming out. So first, we will have Dr. Konstantin Vardavas sharing with us the newly published EU methodology for testing tobacco products for characterizing flavors. Next, we'll have Krzysztof and myself will be presenting data from the EUREST-PLUS and ITC studies on perceptions and behaviors of menthol smokers in Europe. Professor Geoffrey Fong will then share ITC findings on the impact of the Canadian menthol ban on quitting, and has really interesting projections that are being applied to the EU. Lastly, we'll have Dr. Rosamari Hispoke discussing with us the tobacco industry tactics that were used against tobacco flavor bans in Europe. We then will end with some questions and answers. We hope you enjoyed this webinar, and without further ado, Cornel, if you would like to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Krystyna. Thank you, Krzysztof. And of course, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Konstantin Vardavas, our friend from Greece. He is a medical epidemiologist and he having a background in public health and tobacco control. He coordinated the EUREST-PLUS project, the project coordinated by ENSP, and he was the main coordinator. And this project was under Horizon 2020 program. And of course, he coordinated in association with Professor Berakis, the joint action on tobacco control, the first joint action on tobacco control. In this moment, he leads the technical group for assessing tobacco products flavors, and I will kindly ask Konstantin to share his screen and to let us know his presentation for today.
Okay, so good morning and good afternoon. My name is Konstantin Vardavas, and I'd like to present a bit of the role of the methodology and what is the approach in Europe for regulating tobacco product flavors, as previously mentioned. In short, I've no conflicts of interest to declare. but making it very clear that the positions I'm bringing forward are personal, and the content, interpretation of these slides are my own and may not necessarily reflect the views of the European Commission or the Independent Advisory Panel on Tobacco Product Flavors or the Technical Group on Tobacco Product Flavors, of which I'm the coordinator. So the background is that in Europe, just like in other jurisdictions across the globe, there's certain activities, there's a process towards banning tobacco product flavors. And as mentioned by Christoph earlier, the EU Tobacco Products Directive, which is the Directive 214, as you can see in the top, set out the rules and regulations for a ban on mentholated tobacco products and for other flavored tobacco products. But for a ban to be operational, the European Commission has what we call implementing decisions. Now, these are acts and regulations that support the legislation in how to define what is the process, what is the mechanism to ensure that we have the appropriate process to be able to say that this product has a characterizing flavor or a tobacco product flavor and should be regulated. So in principle, what happens is that the member states themselves, not the Commission itself, not European Union itself, but the member states, the countries, they prohibit the placing on the markets of tobacco products, which is cigarettes and roll your own tobacco for the time being, with a characterizing flavor. And to aim and to assess which product and which products have a characterizing flavor, the member states consult what we call an independent advisory panel of experts. And as appropriate, this independent advisory panel requests input from a technical group of both sensory and chemical assessors that was established by the Commission through an open procurement procedure. Now, currently the technical group, its role at the moment is to carry out the sensory and chemical assessment of tobacco products in European member states, and to do this assessment basing on the comparison of the smelling properties, the odor of test products with those of what we call reference products, products that do not have a specific flavor. Now, the technical group currently that's doing this work is EUREST-Flavors. And the process is that, as an overview of how it happens and how it's operated across Europe, is that input is received from different sources to the member states, and the member states consult the Commission. The Commission then notifies EAP. EAP can consult the technical group, and there's a bit of a cycle until a scientifically proven result is derived. So, in short, when we say in European regulation, a characterizing flavor. Now, this is defined in Europe as a clearly noticeable smell or taste that is other than that of tobacco, and that can result in an additive or a combination of additives that are noticeable either before or during the consumption of a tobacco product. So while that's the broad overview of what is a characterizing flavor. So the biggest aspect and the biggest change from the status quo with our panel of sensory assessors is that we have a highly trained panel of assessors that meet to be able to assess tobacco products. Think of them as connoisseurs of tobacco, just like you'd have a wine connoisseur, sommelier, smell the glass of wine, understand what aromas it produces, where it's from, what type of grapes have been used. We similarly have a very highly trained expert panel of sensory assessors, and they've been trained using a fixed vocabulary, which means when they pick up a smell, they're able to link the smell directly to a chemical substance. As at the level of the nose, the recognition of an odor is at the level of a chemical compound. So specific labels are then used to identify specific chemicals. This highly trained panel has the ability to identify 51 different odors at 10 different levels of concentration. So this is a very highly technical and expert panel. Now, some of the substances that we can smell, and these are the ones that may be derived or potentially can originate from tobacco, smells and odors such as green pepper, potato skins, citronella, cedar, which may be from tobacco plant metabolism, others such as black tea, rotted dry wood, violets and saffron, cardboard, cucumber, freshly cut grass and hay, and then others such as the smoky and burnt coffee, dried leaves, raisin, prune, which are all noticeable in different levels based on either the tobacco plant, curing processes, drying processes, and these are routinely found across different tobacco products. Now, in addition to these odor attributes, which may potentially be from the actual tobacco plant or the curing process, we have a number of other odor attributes that are picked up by the sensory panel that may come from sources that are other than tobacco. And so these are fruity type attributes like artificial apple, cherry, banana, coconut, grape, green banana, etc., etc. We have mint-like odor attributes, which is very important here, especially for the menthol ban. So these are 4 different aromas, because when we have the mint family, there's a distinct smell for menthol, for menthone, for menthol acetate, and spearmint. There's 4 different odors that are allowed to pick up. Of course, another one such as sweet attributes, spicy, confectionery, and floral. So it's a highly trained panel that has been set up as a part of the technical group. And what's the first step that they do once the product is received from the EU member state is to evaluate each tobacco sample using these 51 individual aroma attributes that we talked about just beforehand on a 0 to 10 point scale. And this is done 3 replicates on 36 identical samples. And the mean scoring, which I'll show what this means, is then ranked from largest to smallest. And of course, then decoy and reference samples are also included. This is what we see as a spidergram, which is the actual rating of a test product at the moment. And as you can see, for instance, we have a peak towards menthol and menthol acetate. You can see the peak slightly above 3.5 out of 10 score. I'll put it here. We have a spearmint towards here. We have then a dark chocolate aroma popping up here with an intensity score of about 2. Now, intensity score of 1 means it is noticeable. 2 means it's twice as much as noticeable, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is the first aspect, which is a descriptive profiling. And this provides an sort of like an odor profile of the tobacco product. Now, the next stage in the sensory analysis is once we have this descriptive profiling of a product, a rank rating is performed. Now, rank rating is additional sensory analysis technique in which a construct aroma is created. For instance, in our example beforehand, where we had menthol and chocolates, this could be what is your overall dark mint chocolates or minty chocolate aroma of the product. Now, this is the actual aroma that a consumer would perceive. Is that, for instance, minty chocolate aroma. And this then is separately assessed on a 0 to 10 scale. So we have the descriptive profiling, which is, I say, the Lego blocks. And then we have the rank rating, which is the actual Lego car, if I was to look at it, Lego or building blocks. So those are the 2 primary routes of sensory assessment that are used by this. And then, of course, this is all subsequently supported by chemical testing, which is first a full scan analysis of products. And for instance, here we see a very distinct spike in the chromatogram from the mentholated concentration that we picked up in the sensory. And then we do a quantification. So collectively, the process through which the products are assessed in the European Union at the moment to see if they're compliant with the ban on the menthol ban, but also the ban on other characterizing flavors, is that it undergoes descriptive profiling, rank rating within the sensory assessment, and then chemical assessment. Now, these 2 are then combined and brought forward towards the independent advisory panel for them to make a decision and then inform the member states. So I think that's a very quick an overview of what is the methodology in lay terms of the assessment of flavors in tobacco products in Europe. It's a publicly available methodology, and it's this is the link towards this the report which was published recently, and more than happy to provide further detail to the point that it is possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Constantine, and I would like to inform the participants that you will not be able to stay with us till the end. So if someone has, let's say, important and interesting questions for you, they can use the chat or the Q&A facility in the webinar. And if the questions will come after your departure, then you will receive the questions by email from the ENSP Secretariat. Let's move ahead, and as I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar was initiated by our board member, Krzysztof Przewoźniak from Poland. He's, let's say, involved in tobacco control for more than 37 years as a sociologist and also public health specialist, epidemiology, but also cancer and tobacco control, health promotion, healthy lifestyle. So it's a long list of, let's say, qualification that Krzysztof owns. And also he is working in Poland at the WHO Collaborating Center, Marie Sklodowska-Curie National Research Institute of Oncology. And he also is founder of Smart Health in 3D Foundation. And also he was involved in health promotion, and he is involved in Health Promotion Foundation in Poland. It's a long list of, let's say, activities, articles. He published 315 scientific and educational publications, including 56 books and the books chapter, 142 papers, and so and so and so. He received a lot of awards from President of Republic of Poland, Poland Ministry of Health, Polish Academy of Science, UICC Globaling, what times Globaling, for those that remember Globaling, US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, of course from ENSP, and Health Promotion Foundation. So, Krzysztof, it's my pleasure to give the floor to you and to present your slides for today. Please, Krzysztof.
Thank you very much, Cornel. Do you hear me all?
Yes, it's okay. Please go.
It's okay. Yeah. Do you see my presentation?
Of course.
Thank you so much. It's too much said on me, Cornel, so it's too long. Let's say biosketch. I'll be speaking on health beliefs, smoking behaviors, and attitudes towards the tobacco flavor ban in 3 groups of smokers: smokers of menthol, other flavor, and flavor cigarettes. And my presentation is mostly based on the findings from the EUREST-PLUS ITC Europe surveys that was conducted in 8 countries. I'm not only one author of this presentation. The list is much longer. My colleagues from the Health Promotion Foundation, but also principal investigators from all European Union countries and general principal investigators of the EUREST-PLUS or ITC project like Jeff Fong and Konstantin Vardavas. Thank you once again all for your support. Very briefly, in introductory words on what happened. As you know, since May 2017, the tobacco flavor ban came into force in the European Union as an effect of 2014 Tobacco Product Directive. However, menthol cigarettes could be still sold until May 2012. This tobacco control measure was mostly aimed to change health behaviors and beliefs of millions of tobacco users, but especially those who are smoked menthol or other flavor cigarettes. but that time there were very few cross-national studies on attitudes of menthol and other flavor cigarette smokers toward tobacco control regulation. The studies on menthol much more concentrated on chemical compounds than on attitudes. And last but not least, in the last WHO report on menthol regulation, there is a call for more surveys on the beliefs and attitudes of menthol, other flavors. So this is a time to get step forward. The aim of my presentation is to assess patterns and changes in health beliefs, smoking behaviors and attitudes towards tobacco flavor in all above mentioned groups. What are data I'm using? I'm using data from 2 waves of the EUREST-PLUS ITC Europe surveys that have been conducted on nationwide randomized samples of adults from Germany, Greece, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Spain, England, and the Netherlands. 2 countries, England and Netherlands, started ITC projects a little earlier than the rest countries. For analysis of social and behavioral patterns of smoking behaviors and cessation, as well as health beliefs and attitudes toward the tobacco flavor ban, my analysis is based on data from the wave 1, which was conducted in 2016, and the total number of respondents is approximately 11,000. The analysis of changes in health beliefs, prevalence of cigarette smoking by tobacco flavor and cessation behaviors following the ban is based on data from both waves, including wave 2, which was conducted in 2018 and is treated as a post-TPD analysis. All analyses were conducted among smokers of menthol, other flavor cigarettes, or combined group, let's say flavor cigarette smokers, then compare with smokers of N-flavor cigarettes or those without usual cigarette brands. Let's start from that slide. That slide shows what is the majority of the problem in the beginning and the bottom line. So as you can see, for all 6 countries, the prevalence of all flavor cigarettes was at the time at the level of 10%. Most of this prevalence belonged to the prevalence of menthol cigarettes. So 7% of smokers smoke menthol cigarettes, and approximately 3% other flavors. However, you can see the big differences between countries, with 2 countries in which the prevalence of, first of all, menthol cigarettes were much higher than in other countries. It is England and Poland, also because the sale of such a products and industry investment in these countries, the same is partly in Germany, was at the time at a big level. When we analyze proportion of daily smokers and number of cigarettes smoked per day among smokers of menthol and other flavor and flavor cigarettes, we see that first of all, menthol cigarettes are a little the proportion of daily smokers in this group is lower than in other groups, including smokers of other flavor and flavor cigarettes. And the same is with the number of cigarettes smoked per day. Smokers of menthol cigarettes mainly smoking less than 10 cigarettes a day. So there is probably bigger proportion of occasional smokers in these groups than in compare with another analyzed group. The second important observation is that using the heaviness of smoking index and also the most important indicator from the Fagersten scale, the time for first cigarette after waking up, we see that the level of dependence for menthol cigarette smokers is substantially lower than for those who are smoking cigarettes with other flavor or smoking and flavor cigarettes. Please keep in mind this observation, because this observation can potentially also explain why smoking behaviors, different smoking behaviors in these two groups differ from other groups. As regards beliefs in the harmfulness of flavor cigarettes among smokers of flavor and non-usual cigarette brand, you can see that at the bottom line survey in 2016, and it was of course reasonable, also show in other countries, those who smoke flavor cigarettes were much more often convinced that menthols are less harmful, or menthols are smoother. And however, what is interesting, both flavor and flavor cigarettes smokers have the same proportion of for accepting the idea that additive-free cigarettes are less harmful. So we see that there is not 100% consistency in attitudes and behaviors of those smokers. Now I show you the graph with support of menthol, other flavor and flavor cigarette smokers for various tobacco control policies, but I would like to concentrate your attention on the bottom of the figure. When you have a support for ban on additives, you can see, and this is again reasonable, that the support of menthol cigarettes smokers for such a ban was the least 1-2 times lower than for other groups. And another interesting slide on intention of menthol and other flavor cigarette smokers to change their smoking behaviors after implementation of tobacco flavor ban. It was still projection at the time, because the study was, as I mentioned, done in 2016. But if you take a look on the left, you can see that approximately 30% of menthol cigarettes smokers declare that they will be looking for a way to get banned product after implementation of tobacco flavor ban, which was, of course, the reason of the risk of potential risk of additional smuggling of menthol cigarette, of illicit trade of menthol cigarette inside the countries. The number of those who wanted to quit among menthol cigarette smokers reached 16%. In other flavor cigarette group, the group was also not too big, 10%. What were substantial changes in health beliefs among analyzed groups? This analysis, as I said, is based on 2 waves of the EUREST-PLUS Europe ITC project. As you can see, we have positive changes in evaluating smoking as a cause of mouth cancer. So the number of those who accept that idea increased from 76 to 84. Substantial increases also among those who were convinced about smoking as a cause of COPD, and much bigger increase for those who were considering smoking as a cause of blindness. And the last one slide shows the changes in smoking behaviors following the TPD implementation among all three groups of cigarette smokers. And as you can see, the reaction for particular groups are a little different. For instance, those who were smoking menthol cigarettes at the bottom line survey in 2016, in almost 52% declare in 2018 survey declared that they continue smoking of menthol cigarette. Another group, 33%, switched to flavour cigarettes, and the least one group, 14%, declared that they quit completely 2 years later. As for other flavors cigarette smokers, the pattern is totally different. Most of those smokers, 62%, switched from other flavors to N flavors. A little lower number or percent declared that they quit completely, only 9%, and 11% continue smoking of other flavor cigarettes. What are conclusions we can make after such analysis? So the first conclusion is that European smokers of cigarette with different flavors differ. In some countries or in some variables broadly differ in smoking behaviors, cessation characteristics, health beliefs, and their attitudes towards the tobacco flavor ban. So it's not one consistent European tobacco attitude or smoking behaviors in this group, but rather different patterns in different countries. The second important conclusion is that the lower dependence of menthol cigarette smokers could lead to greater, potentially, quit rates after the ban implementation. However, cross-country differences could lead to differential impact of the flavor ban on smoking behaviors and cessation, if not accompanied by implementing additional measures such as target tailored smoking cessation support or public awareness campaign. Unfortunately, in most of countries, we don't have such a programs. Third conclusion is on enforcement of tobacco flavor. We can contribute, such enforcement can contribute to positive changes in health beliefs and to decrease in prevalence of menthol and other flavor cigarette smokers. But of course, we need more studies in this field. However, as at least these studies show, this decline can be primarily driven by flavor smokers switching to flavor tobacco rather than quitting smoking. So we can strengthen once again the smoking cessation offer for that group. If not strengthened by other tobacco control policies and programs, the tobacco flavor ban can also contribute, unfortunately, this is the big risk, to illicit trade of menthol cigarette in EU countries, as majority of menthol cigarette smokers want to continue smoking of menthol cigarettes after the ban enforcement and intend to look for such a tobacco products on black market. Another study that I'm conducting in collaboration with WHO on illicit tobacco trade showed that we are in the beginning of the new phenomena in illicit tobacco trade. That means the illicit trade of menthol cigarettes. This phenomenon is rising into last years. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Krzysztof. Very comprehensive and very interesting data. And yeah, what you said at the end is also showed by the fact that the tobacco industry is hardly trying to keep the menthol products on the market. using different tactics, but we'll hear about this a little bit later. For the moment, I would like to invite Christina Kyriakos. She is currently a PhD student at the Imperial College in London. There she is working with the public health policy evaluation team. And Christina will present us some findings from Netherlands. Please, Christina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cornell. Thank you. I will be presenting today on menthol smokers' behavioral responses to the EU ban on menthol using findings from the ITC Netherlands surveys. I want to acknowledge all of my colleagues involved in this from the University of Waterloo with the ITC study and Maastricht University. I also want to acknowledge my PhD supervisors, Philippos Philippidis and Pete Driesen, and the funding support for the ITC project, and also myself. And Jeff Fong has been an expert witness consultant for governments defending their country's policies, regulations, and litigation, and all other authors do not have disclosures to report. Okay, so we know that flavors play an important role in the tobacco industry's marketing playbook. And research suggests that flavored products can facilitate smoking initiation and sustain long-term use by increasing the appeal, masking the harshness of tobacco, and reducing harm perceptions. Also, the cooling effects of menthol can make it feel less irritating on the throat and therefore makes it an easy product to start smoking. Globally, flavored cigarettes, particularly menthol, are used disproportionately by adolescents and racial ethnic minority groups who have historically been deliberately targeted by the tobacco industry. Preliminary evidence supports that regulating flavors can reduce the overall tobacco use, promote smoking cessation, and prevent initiation by reducing the addictiveness and attractiveness of these products. However, population-level studies have been few in number. As we've heard, the EU TPD prohibits placing of the market of cigarettes and roll your own tobacco with a characterizing flavor. And we've also heard that menthol was delayed until May 2020, but the first part of the ban went into effect for other characterizing flavors, was transposed into national law in May 2016. So we know evaluating the EU menthol ban is critical for forming evidence base for population level impact of tobacco flavor policies, particularly as more and more countries contemplate or adopt flavor bans. So the aim of this study was to examine behavioral responses to the EU menthol ban among adults in the Netherlands who reported smoking menthol cigarettes before the ban. So I'll be presenting some preliminary findings from using the ITC Netherlands surveys, which is with a new cohort. And it is a three-wave prospective longitudinal cohort study with a national representative study of adult smokers 18 plus from the Netherlands. And so wave one occurred from February to March 2020, so right before the menthol ban went into effect. And then wave two occurred 4 to 6 months post menthol ban, so from September to November 2020. And wave three is due to start this month, which would be 1 month after 1 year after implementation. So in this presentation, I'm solely just going to be focusing on some preliminary cross-sectional data using wave two. So this includes a total sample size of 1,926. And wave two includes both recontact respondents, so those from wave one, regardless of their smoking status. So there were recent quitters also included, and also replenishment respondents to replace the sample that was lost to follow-up. So data was collected using computer-assisted web interviews, and analyses were conducted in Stata using weighted data. So the main outcome measure that was examined was behavioral responses to the menthol ban among those who were reporting using menthol before the ban. So specifically, respondents were told that in May 2020, menthol was banned from cigarettes and roll your own tobacco. And they were asked, were you smoking menthol cigarettes before the ban came into effect? If they answered yes, they were asked, what did you do with menthol? What did you do when menthol cigarettes were banned? So these are the same questions that Krzysztof was also presenting on, but that they had asked previously what they thought they would do. And this is now asking, what did you actually do? Okay, so what did we find? Overall, 14.2% of respondents reported that they were smoking menthol cigarettes before the ban came into effect. However, when we look at this by gender, you can see a significantly higher proportion of females reported smoking before the ban compared to males. So specifically 20% of females versus 9% of males. And this is a common pattern that we have seen in Europe. In addition, when we look at other characteristics, we find that a higher percentage of younger age groups, so 18 to 25-year-olds and 25 to 39-year-olds, reported prior menthol use compared to those in the higher age groups. So 21% of 18 to 25-year-olds were smoking menthol prior to the ban, compared to 7% for those aged 55 plus. There were some differences by household income and education, but the pattern was not as clear and might be influenced by the larger percentage of respondents who didn't state their income or education level. Okay, so now among those who were smoking before the ban, so this was a sample of 291 that were then subsequently asked what they did. The first thing we see is that 10% reported that they quit smoking entirely. 21% said that they reduced the amount that they smoked. However, 3/4 of respondents reported that in response to the ban, they smoked non-menthol cigarettes. And there were other product replacements. So 21% said that they smoked roll your own tobacco cigarettes with menthol filters. 10% smoked other menthol tobacco products such as cigars, and 16% reported that they used e-cigarettes. So lastly, we did see that 1/3 of respondents reported that they found a way to get menthol cigarettes. And 19% reported that they did something else, which we're not quite sure what that something else is. Now, in order to contextualize and interpret some of these initial findings, I just want to mention some of the limitations. So first, the analysis, of course, uses cross-sectional data and therefore can assess the actual impact of the menthol ban on quitting. But future longitudinal analysis will look at the cohort sample to compare cessation outcomes between smokers whose usual brand was menthol versus non-menthol at wave 1. So that brings me to my second point, that the measurement for what constitutes being a prior menthol smoker is not defined in terms of how frequently they were using it. It's not that they necessarily use it as their usual brand. They could have already been using a mix of non-menthol and menthol cigarettes prior to the ban. And also, the behavioral response choices are also not mutually exclusive. So you could have had a respondent who could have reduced consumption, but also used non-menthol cigarettes. But this is something that will be examined more closely. And lastly, I think we should be cautious in interpreting the response of finding a way to get menthol cigarettes. It's implying actually doing illicit purchasing, although it very well could be. But given that the timeline for this was 4 to 6 months post-ban, it's possible that prior menthol smokers stockpiled menthol cigarettes. But despite these limitations, these findings give us a first look at how menthol smokers responded to the EU ban. In conclusion, findings suggest that the EU menthol ban influenced quitting and consumption among pre-ban menthol smokers. However, a majority of respondents responded to the ban by using non-menthol cigarettes. And as we said, 1/3 found a way to get menthol cigarettes. This also, as Krzysztof said, reinforces the need for strategies to increase cessation support so that we're ensuring that menthol smokers aren't just switching to non-menthol cigarettes or other products, but rather they are quitting. And also to be able to monitor and ensure policy compliance. So a special thank you to all the ITC research organizations and research support. And then lastly, I'm just going to present very quickly just a few other findings from the EUREST-PLUS study as continuation of Krzysztof's. We unfortunately don't have data from all the EU member states from the EUREST-PLUS study in post-menthol ban. But during implementation of the ban, we do have some data asking them whether they noticed the removal of characterizing flavors and additives. So just to present a few of those findings, acknowledge all the authors of the EUREST-PLUS project, ITC. And so I won't reiterate the methods as Krzysztof went through this, but this was with 6 European countries and incurred wave 2 in 2018 after the ban, but before application to menthol. Respondents were asked, over the last 12 months, have you noticed any of the following changes to cigarettes or roll your own tobacco? Yes, no, and one of the questions was the removal of characterizing flavors as well as additives, vitamins, or caffeine. And so what we saw was that 13% overall of the respondents, this is among current smokers, reported that they noticed the removal of flavors and additives. But you can see this varied quite a bit by the EU member states. So highest in Romania, Hungary, Poland. And when we look at correlates of noticing the removal of flavors, again, we see that respondents who are from countries such as Hungary, Poland, Romania had a much higher odds of noticing removal of flavor compared to Spain. We also saw that respondents who were aged 18 to 24 and 25 to 39 had greater odds of noticing compared to respondents aged 55 and plus. So this just gives us a really just quick snapshot that shows that in 2018, 1 in 10 smokers from 6 EU countries reported noticing the removal of flavors and additives in cigarettes. It varied by country and age, but of course, continued monitoring of the EU TPD ban on characterizing flavor is needed, particularly now that its application to menthol has gone into effect. I think that's a good segue to Professor Fong's presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. And yeah, it's true. Next speaker is coming from Canada, Professor Jeffrey Fong. He's a professor of physiology and public health and health system at the University of Waterloo, and senior investigator at the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research. And because today almost all speakers mentioned the ITC project, he is the chief principal investigator of this important project, the International Tobacco Control Policy Evaluation Project. And this project was already implemented in 29 countries, including 9 European Union countries, and is focused on the evaluation and understanding of the impact of the FCTC policies. I will kindly ask Professor Fong to take the floor and to tell us more about the ITC project, maybe we have the chance today to hear very interesting and new things about this important project. Please, Professor.
Thank you very much, Cornell. Let me share my screen here and start. I got up early this morning and I took a picture of the solar eclipse, so that's a nice way to start the day. My talk here is on the impact of Canada's menthol cigarette ban on quitting among menthol smokers, and what I also do is I project the impact of the ban on quitting found in Canada to the European Union countries. So I want to thank my co-authors for this, and here. My disclosures already been provided in Christina's talk, and no other authors have any disclosures to report. So there have been a number of global recommendations for menthol bans. Christina went over why this is. Menthol has a soothing effect on tobacco starting experimentation and progression of youth into smoking, and it makes it harder for it makes it actually more attractive and appealing for adult smokers. So as a result, in the FCTC Article 910 guidelines, there is a call for any kind of ingredients that are used to increase palatability to be prohibited and restricted. That clearly includes menthol. WHO's advisory note recommends a ban on menthol, and just a month and a half ago, the FDA in the US commits to doing a menthol cigarette ban within the next year. So menthol bans, here's the global status as of last month. 35 menthol bans have been implemented in countries. There are 2 that have been adopted but not yet enforced, and there are 2 that are under formal consideration right now. Menthol cigarettes in Canada, before the ban, it only took up about 5% of the Canadian cigarette market, much lower than US, about 35 to 40%, and among African American smokers, 80 to 85% of cigarette smokers smoke menthols. This is lower than the European Union, 7.7%. We also find, and you find this in a number of countries, that for younger smokers, menthol use is higher proportionately than in adults. So there's data from Canada, 21% among high school students, 2% among adults. In May of 2015, Nova Scotia was the first province to ban menthol. During the 2 years, 2015 to 17, 6 other provinces banned menthol, and in October 2017, there was a national menthol ban with the 3 remaining provinces covered by that. So in the ITC surveys, the ITC Canada Survey is a cohort survey. It's the Canadian arm of the larger ITC for country smoking and vaping survey. We looked at 2 waves, 2016 and 2018 of that survey. We published a paper in April of this year, led by Janet Chung Hall, in which we examined the impact of the menthol ban among 138 menthol smokers and the control group of 1,098 non-menthol cigarette smokers. We looked at the waves before 2016 and after 2018 in 7 provinces that covered 83% of the Canadian population, and you can see the provinces there. We know of course, of Michael Chaitin and his team's work on evaluating the menthol ban in the province of Ontario. This is a broader, more national evaluation, including Ontario. So here is the timeline from 2015 to 2017 of the menthol bans that were played out in the provinces of Canada. You can see Nova Scotia, Alberta, and New Brunswick coming before the ITC. At the bottom there in yellow, you can see the dates of Wave 1 and Wave 2 of the Canadian survey and of the 7 provinces that are included in this pre-post analysis. So the analyses, we looked at longitudinally the Wave 1 smokers who were recontacted at Wave 2. The outcomes were 3: quit attempts, quit success, that is point prevalence at the time of the Wave 2 survey, whether they were smoking or not. And of those who quit before the menthol ban, were they likely to stay quit or to relapse? And so we measured that as well. Since we have in the ITC survey, for those that quit or for those who are smoking, their last quit attempt and whether or not it came before the menthol ban came into place in each of the provinces, we can then identify those who quit before the menthol ban versus others. So our main predictor, of course, was whether they were smoking menthols, and it makes a nice quasi-experimental design because we have in the same country, we have menthol smokers who are going to be affected by the ban directly and the non-menthols as controls. The covariates are really standard for the ITC project. So here are the results. Here, the first line, quit attempts. Menthol smokers at Wave 2 reported 58.7% of them reported having had a quit attempt. Non-menthol smokers during that same period of time, 49%, the difference was 9.7 percentage points, significant. Quit success among daily smokers, 21% of menthol smokers quit at that point, Wave 2 survey, versus 11.6% of non-menthol smokers. So it's really important here because it's the difference. Smokers will quit over time. So comparing the menthols versus the non-menthols gives you an estimate of the actual impact of the menthol ban. That was 9.4%, and that was significant. If we consider all smokers, not just daily smokers, and look at quit success, it's 21.5% of menthol smokers, 14.0% of non-menthol smokers. The difference was 7.5 percentage points, which was at the 0.06 level. And then finally, with respect to those smokers who quit before the ban, 12.7% of menthol smokers stayed quit versus 5.2% of non-menthol smokers who quit before the menthol ban. So it's controlled for with respect to time. The difference was 7.5 percentage points. That was significant. So you can see on all these measures, quit attempts, quit success, and staying quit for those who had quit before the ban, we have a significant effect increase among menthol smokers compared to the control group of non-menthol smokers in Canada. So the common argument against banning specific tobacco products is that you're going to get huge amount of smuggling. So this may well differ across different countries, but we could test this in Canada. That's what we did here. We have a kind of a flow chart of what happened to the pre-ban menthol smokers, 138, 21.5% currently not smoking, 59% currently smoking non-menthol cigarettes, 19.5% currently smoking menthol cigarettes. Now, that 19.5%, that is what they reported. And I have, we looked into this in greater detail. So most menthol smokers switched to non-menthols. That's not surprising given the addictiveness of cigarettes. Really hard to quit. Not surprising that most switched. The overall level of menthol smokers still smoking menthols was fairly low, 19.5%. But then we could, since we asked for brand smoked and some other questions with respect to what they were smoking, we were able to assess whether those 19.5% were really still smoking menthols. And it turns out that many of them were not. So for example, some of them were reported smoking a cigarette brand that was definitely a non-menthol brand. So after removing this incorrect reporting, it turns out that less than 10%, about half of those that are reported, were smoking illicit menthol cigarettes. So that actually moves the 59.1% currently smoking non-menthol cigarettes to closer to 70%. And of those, we examined those who purchased from illegal sources, which we know are First Nations reserves in Canada. And that did not differ for menthol smokers compared to non-menthol smokers, 12.2% versus 9%. So at least in Canada, there was not a significant increase in illicit purchasing after the menthol ban. So what we can do is we can apply the impact of the menthol ban on increasing quitting of 7.5% to the EU and 28 member states. So we got the number of menthol smokers from the Eurobarometer March 2017 survey, and we could take the number of additional, we could estimate the number of additional quitters in the EU as well as in each member state, which would be the number of menthol smokers from the 2017 Eurobarometer survey, and multiply by 7.5%. And so that's what we did. So here's from Eurobarometer 2017, 109 million smokers in the EU, 7.67% of them were smoking menthols. And so then we can multiply by that to get the number of menthol smokers and also the 95% confidence interval. So there were 8.368 million menthol smokers in the EU. Then we can multiply those numbers by 7.5%, which is the quit rate. And it turns out that we estimate that if the menthol ban in Canada of 7.5% additional quitting was experienced in the EU, then there would be 627,661 additional smokers who would quit. This is above and beyond what would be expected otherwise, because we had the control condition of the non-menthol smokers. So these will be additional smokers who quit because of the menthol ban. That's a huge number, 95% confidence interval, 550,000 to 715,000. So you can do this in all the countries. This is obviously a table that you can't parse easily. So some highlights in the EU, the highest rates of menthol were in Finland, Denmark, and the UK, 23.5% in Finland. The lowest menthol was Cyprus, 1.5%, Greece, 1.6%. Other countries of note, Netherlands, 15.9%, Poland, 13.4%, Germany, 5.4%, France and Italy lower, 5.2 and 2.9. So then you multiply that all out, and the greatest number of additional quitters would be the UK, but of course, they're no longer in the EU, but we're still following them. 123,686 would be projected to quit, additional quitters because of the menthol ban, and so on. Poland, followed by Poland, France, and Germany. And here's a map that shows the same thing. So in summary, banning menthol cigarettes in Canada led to substantial positive public health outcomes without, at least in Canada, significant negative consequences. As I said, most menthol smokers switched to non-menthols, which of course is to be expected. Banning menthol cigarettes led to significant increases in quit attempts, quitting, and to significantly lower relapse rates among menthol smokers who had quit, 7.5% lower relapse. There was no significant increase in illicit purchasing. If the Canadian results are applied to the EU, a menthol ban is estimated to lead to 627,000 additional EU smokers who quit smoking. It'll be interesting as Christina evaluates the pre-post in Netherlands, whether that's going to bear out. Now, the ITC project is positioned to measure the actual impact of the EU menthol ban in Spain, the Netherlands, England, with possible future with a possible future survey wave in France. But if we can extend the EUREST-PLUS 6 European country cohort survey, we can evaluate the ban in 5 other member states. And that is the list of the ITC EU countries where we could be evaluating the menthol ban. And that would be across 9 EU countries if EUREST-PLUS is extended. That covers 77 million smokers, which is 71% of the EU smokers, is 72% of EU menthol smokers. So we hope we get that opportunity to go back to the 6 European countries. So thank you so much for your attention. Here are our funders and our research organizations and research support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really very interesting data and projection to the European Union. And I am sure that this projection is very close to the reality, because really the menthol ban is effective. And we already started to receive questions, and I will announce everyone that at the end we have a special session, and I kindly ask the panelists to check the questions received in the chat and the Q&A, and to prepare answers. And now we are moving to the next speaker, Dr. Rosamari Hispoke. She is a health inequalities researcher and specialist in tobacco control, working in public health and geography departments in the UK, Sweden, and New Zealand. Now she is part of the Tobacco Control Research Group at the University of Bath. Congratulations for the World No Tobacco Day Award. And also involved in STOP project, Stopping Tobacco Organization and Products. Her research over recent years has focused on evaluation of the European Union Tobacco Products Directive and associated United Kingdom legislation, including ban on menthol and flavors. Her work consists in developing an understanding of global tobacco industry supply chains. So, Rosamari, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm from the STOP project and the University of Bath, and our focus is on the tobacco industry itself. So most of the talks this afternoon have been about what the effect on smokers, whereas the focus on my talk is on the tobacco industry and its associates. And I'd like to thank my colleagues, particularly Mateusz Zadomski and Karin Silva, for their help in preparing this talk. But there's other people at the University of Bath who have also been helping with our menthol research along the way. Okay, so as we've heard today, menthol academic research has found that menthol is a problem, and the tobacco industry would agree with this, but for them, menthol is a good thing because it brings them more smokers and more profit. And how do we know that? We know that because they have been interfering in menthol bans when they've been proposed all around the world. So, for example, in Brazil, Chile, Canada, and the United States. And then with the EU ban, one of the big things that people have mentioned today is that there were an extra 3-year phase out to May 2020 for menthol itself. And this was because the tobacco industry argued that menthol had such a large share of the market that they needed more time to prepare. So here we've got a graph of all the countries in the WHO region of Europe. So there's 2 things that I kind of need to say about this graph. The first thing is it's Euromonitor data. Euromonitor does take grants from the tobacco industry and its associates. So we need to be a bit careful with this data, but obviously they also need accurate information. So that's why we do use it ourselves, but we need to share that caveat. And the other thing is it isn't showing numbers, it is showing percentages, so proportion of the market. So this is the proportion of the market that is menthol and which has flavoured capsules, so some of which are menthol and some of which are other flavours. If we look at the right of the graph, then we can see that the United Kingdom and Poland again stick out as being the countries with the most use of menthol and flavour capsules. And I've also got a picture here of one of these flavour capsules inside the filter. So the idea is that you squeeze the filter and then the flavour appears. So here's another graph showing, so that graph before was 2018, before the flavour ban. This graph shows what was going on up to the flavour ban and then for 1 year afterwards. So if we look at the wider yellow line at the bottom of the graph, we can see what was going on in most of the EU. So there was a low use of menthol and flavours. There was very little increase, and then there was decline once the legislation was enacted in 2016 as they were prepared for the menthol ban. In the UK, however, which is the dotted line, you can see that actually the use increased right until the ban, and then there was a substantial decline when the ban came into force. Poland, there was, like the UK, there was an increase, but there does not appear to have been a decrease in menthol as a proportion of the market, or a very small decrease after the ban was enacted. So I'm going to spend the rest of the talk looking at some of the reasons for the shapes that we can see here in this graph. So we've looking at the UK and Poland, which have a high proportion of the market that is menthol, and so in that way they're similar, but actually they're very different places, and the ban is coming to force in very different contexts. Obviously, the big thing at the moment for the UK is Brexit. Tobacco industry allies have explicitly said that Brexit could be used to roll back some tobacco control legislation, and they've mentioned the menthol ban in that context. But up till now, there seems to be no indication that the government is thinking of doing that. Poland is a very important centre for the tobacco industry supply chain in Europe, with substantial amount of farming and tobacco manufacturing. And this is something that the tobacco industry has used in its argument when the ban was being developed. So I'm now going to talk about the first case study in Poland and how it was affected, or how the tobacco industry acted as the ban was coming into, was being developed. So the tobacco industry made arguments which were focused on the extent of the supply chain in Poland. So first of all, they argued that Poland produced the most manufactured tobacco products in the EU. And they said that at the time it had 6 manufacturing factories which were employing 6,000 people. And then in terms of farming, they said that it was the second largest grower in the EU. And also that this made a substantial proportion of exports. So when we think about the revision to the Tobacco Products Directive and the review, we're looking at Poland's role. So Poland joined the EU in 2004, and so it was a member in 2011. when the EU began its review of the Tobacco Products Directive. At this stage, compared with when the original Tobacco Products Directive was enacted or developed, the health lobby was weaker. There were splits due to e-cigarettes, extent to which they thought they could be important in tobacco control or not. And another issue was the 2008 financial crisis. So a lot of governments were very concerned about their finances, and that was more to the fore compared to health. So in 2013, they took the review, and the members of the European Parliament began to voted on the Tobacco Products Directive. So for most countries in the EU, the MEPs voted depending on their political preferences. So left-wing and Green MPs voted for the health, and the right voted for pro-industry amendments. So, but Poland has the 6th largest number of MEPs, and it held the balance of power. So all Polish MEPs, left or right leaning, they all voted against the stronger tobacco control measures. So Poland opposition to the TPD stemmed from lobbying from media and pro-industry groups, and it was to such an extent that even the Polish health minister advocated supporting business interests rather than health interests. And because Poland had the balance of power, this meant that tobacco control measures in the eventual legislation were weaker. So pictorial warnings were smaller, slim cigarettes were not banned, and for us, the menthol ban was then delayed to 2020. So now I'm going to look at the limitations that have arisen since in 2016 when the ban was enacted, and I'm mostly going to talk about what we found looking at the UK. So the delay till 2020 was a period that the tobacco industry took rather than to slowly reduce its menthol as a proportion of the market. They actually used it to increase the market. We know that they did this by introducing new menthol cigarettes, which were widely advertised to retailers so that they would stock them. And then they had a buyback scheme, which meant that when the legislation came into place, they reassured retailers they would buy back any menthol products that they had unsold. So they were incentivized to continue selling it as long as possible. They also didn't really put any measures or information in place until very late, which suggests that they didn't always need all this lengthy time to do so. So these are some of the reasons why the UK proportion of menthol in the market grew right up to the ban. So one of the big limitations that has appeared is that menthol not being banned as it is in Canada as an ingredient, but just being banned as a characterising flavour. So as the ban in 2020 came into place, new cigarette ranges were introduced. This happened in various countries, and we know this happened in the UK and in Poland. Retailers were instructed to inform customers which brand that they should switch to. What happens after this is that we've had tobacco companies accusing each other of selling products that do have a smell and taste. And as we heard in our first presentation, it's actually quite difficult to assess characterising flavour and quite expensive with the number of experts who need to be involved. Another problem with the ban was that it only applied to cigarettes and roll your own tobacco. So, so what happened was that the tobacco companies introduced new products called Cigarillos, which were new because they actually had a menthol filter in. And as you can see here, they look very like cigarettes. The only difference is that they have a tobacco leaf wrapper. So they're very similar in terms of size, in terms of names, and they can also bypass the UK legislation on plain packs so that they still have branding, and they're allowed in small pack sizes, and they're allowed price marks as well, which means they can be sold very cheaply, and even more so because of the way that cigarillos are taxed compared to cigarettes. So when they first came onto the market, they were about half the price of the cheapest cigarette packs. We know they've been successful because just this week, we found that they're actually launching a new 20 pack. So instead of a 10 pack. Another thing that the legislation missed is accessories that are sold separately. So they've started introducing flavour cards that you can put into a pack of cigarettes for an hour or so, and then we have a mint flavour, and they've also got mint filters and menthol flavoured papers. In the UK, we've seen these cigarettes are sold widely, which have a hole in the filter, and then you can put a menthol insert into the filter, and then advertised online widely, including in Poland. There are these flavour capsules, so you can have flavours, and then you can use a cocktail stick to push them into an unflavoured cigarette, and then squeeze them and switch on the flavours you would with a normal capsule cigarette. The final issue is that the flavour ban is only for, it does not include next generation products. So that means doesn't include heated tobacco products or e-cigarettes. And the tobacco industry use this as an opportunity to increase the menthol flavours in heated tobacco products in particular, and also e-cigarettes, and to encourage people to switch them. And obviously they've only been around for a few years, and we don't know what the long-term effects of these products are. What also didn't happen is that the governments did not run a big cessation campaigns to run with the menthol ban. So instead, the tobacco industry were left to their own devices, where they were advising retailers to encourage switching rather than quitting. So what would we recommend for a review of the next review of the Tobacco Products Directive? First thing is to include all tobacco products and accessories in regulation. So that means all pack types and all flavours together at once. To ban menthol as an ingredient, not just at observable levels. And that would save government some money as well. No derogations, phase-ins or sell-through periods. So that would stop sales quickly, and also it would maximise the impact on smokers. And then also we suggest changing taxation systems so that all combustible products are taxed in a similar way. Thanks all for listening.
Thank you very much. And yeah, you are right. The industry is using a lot of tactics just to keep the customers and the market and their profit. And now we have time for a session of discussions. And I will start with the first question received from Dr. Pierre Bizel. He is asking how all the, let's say, learned lesson after the menthol ban and the implementation of the Directive 40 from 2014, how this lesson learned can be used during the revision of the directive. especially of course related to the topic of the today webinar, flavoring on tobacco products. And we saw already what Dr. Hispoke said, that maybe it's time to ban menthol, not only to ban the idea of the menthol, so to totally ban the menthol in the tobacco products. But I will let the speakers to answer to this question. So it's up to you to decide who can give an answer, how the new possible revised directive can answer to all the problems that we saw after the first directive.
I think it should be possible, because the Canadian ban already does ban menthol as a flavour.
Any other idea or let's say advice to us related to the revision of the directive?
Yeah, I think Dr. Hispoke really mentioned a lot of them in her presentation, and also, you know, ensuring that it's expanded to other products. And the TPD does give member states the ability to ban specific additives. So this could include other flavor additives, including menthol, and you know, it's difficult, I think, to be able to ban some of these accessories. I know that that was a very difficult thing to include in the first TPD. But I think if other efforts can be placed too on promoting smoking cessation, to encourage these menthol smokers to quit instead of switching.
I think the banning of tobacco flavors and flavors at all is much broader and more important, not only for tobacco control, but also for all public health issues. Let's, at least for a while, move to alcohol control. The flavoring of alcohol products is, at least in last years, bigger and bigger problems. Breezers, you know, small bottles. This is the issue of non-alcohol, sweetened and flavoring products. So we can argue not only as tobacco control advocates, but also as a public health scientists or leaders arguing to the European Union or another legislative agencies that there is a need for banning flavors, or at least to find a way to banning flavors in the most risky products on the market, such not only tobacco, but also alcohol, I guess, and maybe collaborate hand in hand with colleagues from alcohol control.
Thank you, Krzysztof. And we have in the chat a long discussion related to the situation in Canada. And I will kindly ask Professor Fong if he can explain a little bit this situation based on the answer on the question and answers in the chat.
Do you mean with respect to the workarounds that Les?
Yes.
Right. So Les Hagen had asked about whether we had any data on the workarounds that the industry used in Canada, notably the menthol cards and capsules, and Rosemary had mentioned this in her talk. We didn't see, I heard of them, but we really didn't see, you know, high popularity of that kind of action. Perhaps in Canada, where the industry is quite weak relative to other places in the world, and that menthol was only about 5% of market share. So there was less at stake, and so perhaps, you know, it didn't really catch on. With respect to the cards, although I'm not an expert, I've been told by those that know far more than I do, that menthol cards are just not a very good way of introducing menthol into the stick, because menthol is really strong, as we all know, and that if you don't deliver it right, you might get, you know, too much of it or too little, usually too much of it, and you just don't have that type of control. It's perhaps like salting your food after it's been cooked rather than including it in the preparation. Who knows? But I'm not an expert on that. But so we don't know too much about it, but in the ITC survey, we didn't see hardly any of that. And I don't know of any data that anyone has on what happened with those workarounds in Canada.
I also want to mention, I think in a few countries, the industry responded with water capsules. So they weren't flavored, but they kind of have that same innovative appeal to it. So that's something else I think that countries have to look out for. So expanding capsules and filter technologies as part of legislation is also really important, not just flavors.
Yeah, and I do think, just as a general note, that the industry, or perhaps others associated with the industry, are going to throw out all sorts of possibilities, and I don't think regulators need to chase everything down. You know, some of it, just let it die, because there are priorities for tobacco regulation that should be focused on. So I think it's really important, and perhaps evidence from those who do work on tobacco product, you know, regulation and you know, the fine details of design could weigh in on that. But I don't think it's necessary to chase everything down and address everything.
And I will extend a little bit a question that Laurent Hubert addressed. It's related to your key recommendations to, let's say, countries, because he mentioned, yes, the countries that are still menthol products. The key recommendations for countries that are looking to ban menthol, and yeah, some key points in recommending this.
With the flavour cards, the flavour cards was something they brought out just at the beginning of the ban, and we haven't actually heard too much about them afterwards. What's actually come up more later and seems to have expanded are the capsules and the filter innovations. So that might be something for legislation to look at, perhaps more than the flavour cards.
I think also, to respond to Laurent, I think it's really important for advocacy groups to note that because the US has market share of 40% menthol, there's going to be a big fight ahead. Everything that FDA tries to do takes years. I mean, think about graphic warning labels, which have already been on, you know, packs of 100 countries throughout the world. So yet it's 12, 14 years or 13 years since the bill was passed in the US, and still no warning labels, graphic, you know, warning labels. So it's going to take a lot of fight, and I think the advocacy group should, you know, anticipate that and start their own campaigns, in the same way as, of course, we know in California trying to get their ban on flavors through State Bill 793. The campaign needs to start up right now, because there's going to be a big fight, because 40% share is a huge amount in the US.
Thank you. And yeah, if the participants have other questions for you, for the panelists, I don't see any message in chat or in the Q&A. Then I will kindly ask first Christina and then Krzysztof to have some final conclusion of today's meeting. Please, Christina.
Just thank you to all of our speakers. I think, there's a lot to be done in evaluating the countries that have the bans, and also working to help support other countries, especially like the US, and that are facing a lot of this tobacco industry opposition with their implementation as well, and look forward to seeing what continues to come from this work, especially in tandem with some of these other tobacco control policies, like you mentioned, plain packaging, this in improving cessation, the synergistic effects is really critical. So thank you.
I would like to also thank you very much, both presenters, but also participants. As I said in the beginning, I see that there are a group of very interested participants and high-level participants. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Laurent, for your presence at our webinar. This is, to me, a really starting point for discussing or debating on effective enforcement of the ban, not only in the European Union, but also in Canada. We have the first sets of good research data, but we have to do much, much more. And this is one of the recommendation that I would like to make. We have fastened our activities in searching what is going on with the ban in different countries. What was really important for this webinar, that we were debating on different aspects of the phenomenon, but also from different angles, let's say. Another point was presented by Jeff, speaking on Canada experience, another by a group of European researchers. We see some consistencies, but we see also a country-specific needs. I guess we discussing on the menthol ban or effective enforcement of the menthol ban, we have to also get step forward in new debate on the ban of slim cigarettes. We lost, unfortunately, in this field few years ago, but I guess we can use debate on the menthol ban for pushing politicians to do much more on banning slims. And of course, as Pierre Bizel said, controlling what is going on with menthol compounds in novel products. Thank you once again very much for your presence and for your valuable presentations.
Thank you, Krzysztof, and I will not finish before giving again the floor to Dr. Hispoke and to Professor Fong for his final remarks, if they want to intervene.
I'll just simply say we look forward to evaluation studies, as Christina said, in the EU and beyond. We think that the accumulation of data showing success of menthol bans is only going to be further that in other countries. I mean, ITC has data on Africa and other countries where menthol is really high. It's going to be important for us to gather the evidence in these leading edge countries that will inform not only other countries in the region, in their regions, but also throughout the world.
Thank you.
It's been really interesting hearing the talks and all the different ways that the menthol ban is being evaluated. I think the menthol ban itself will be something of a slow burner, in that it's one of the main ways it works is to promote uptake. So hopefully over the next few years there will be fewer people starting smoking.
Thank you very much. And I want to tell you that after this webinar, we will publish an editorial in our scientific journal, in Tobacco Prevention Association journal, on this topic. And also, you probably saw in the chat, we invite all of you to submit abstracts for our next conference, European Conference on Tobacco Control. We still hope that will be possible to organize a face-to-face event at the end of this year. And for sure, we'll have a virtual conference somewhere between, let's say, October and December, if it will not be possible to have a real event face-to-face. I would like also to thank to my colleagues at the ENSP Secretariat, Paulina Starchenko and Karina Mocano, for the help during the today webinar, and hope to see you all to the next ENSP events. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone.
With pleasure, Cornel.